Welcome back to Vaguely Adults. You got one of your hosts, Sarana, here, and
Sherley, hello.
this week, like I tweeted, is gonna be super controversial, and honestly, it might stop a couple of you from listening to us. We're gonna talk about Shrek, and why it's one of the most important pieces of cinema. So why don't you start off with your experiences with Shrek and what Shrek means to you?
Okay, first of all, I would like to start by saying Shrek is life and Shrek is love. All hail Shrek. But no, in all honesty, Shrek is one of my favorite movies. And so when I saw the tweet of what we were filming, I was really excited. And we had very, not opposing, but very different takes on what rewatching Shrek meant. So for me, right, I'm gonna be completely honest. I watch Shrek once a week. Or once every other week. It's my happy go-to movie. The second one just got put on Hulu. But yeah, Shrek is great. It's a great movie. The first one, second one. It's one of those movies where you know how sometimes there's a sequel and you're like, oh, the sequel's never as good as the first one? Yeah, that does not apply to the Shrek franchise. The second one is just as good, in my opinion. The third one is also good. The fourth is also great. Swamp Stories, the little spin-offs they have, also hilarious. I even had the game growing up, a computer game for Shrek.
Well, I'm on the side where I remember Shrek as just really great, a wholesome, family fun type of film, you know. But when I was watching it last night, because that was the first time I watched it since, I want to say, the early 2000s, I did not remember a lot of the film, and I was genuinely surprised that it held up the way that it did. Shrek is 20 years old this year. It came out in 2001, and it's a piece of cinema that holds really true because it tells some really integral stories and morals that I think definitely subconsciously stuck to me over the years.
It's even one of those films when you watch it as a kid. I mean, I don't have memories as a kid, but when you watch it as a kid, it's all fun and games and innocence, and there's still jokes that you catch that are funny, and it's still cartoons and talking animals. And then you watch it as an adult, and then there's all those subtlety, those jokes that you're like, wait, that's too real, or that's an inappropriate joke. When they go into Duloc and they see the castle and Shrek turns to Donkey and he's like, oh, you think he's compensating for something? And the innocence that Donkey has, and he's like, I don't get it. It's, as a kid, obviously you're Donkey. You have no idea what he's talking about. And then you see it as an adult and you're like, that's hilarious.
Yeah, there's a ton of subtleties in this movie that I definitely didn't pick up on as a kid, but I thoroughly enjoyed watching it last night. I honestly forgot that it starts off, the first minute starts off with All-Star Smash Mouth. What an iconic way to start off a movie, you know? I'm just looking over my notes, and I was honestly... Alright, let me think of another word than honestly, because I'm saying that a lot. Rewatching it made me appreciate the writing of the movie, because it touched on some rather serious topics in interesting ways. When all of the othered people, the fairy tale, characters were being huddled up and taken away, and they didn't want to have them in the kingdom because they were others. I was like, the social commentary, oh my gosh, in 2001?
Yep. And even
so good.
Even slightly more subtle when he's giving his speech to the knight, when he's like, oh, whoever wins is gonna get to go on this noble quest, you're gonna get the honor, and if they die, then I'll just send the next one and the next one. And then he even says, what is the line? He says, many of you will die, and it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. That's real, and it stands real to this day. Any ruler, any president, any person with power will always put the people that they have at their disposal in danger, because it's a sacrifice they are willing to make, because they're not the ones being sacrificed. They're not the ones that have to go through this. And it's it's a lot in a child's movie. But as a child, you have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, and just the outright awful treatment of these fairy tale characters, them taking away the witch's broom and snapping it in half and being like, you don't need this anymore. Where you're going, this is not necessary and stuff like that. It's... Ooh. But also, one thing I noticed was when the little knights had unrolled Farquaad's scroll saying, oh, Shrek, you gotta leave this area, blah, blah, blah. The F looks so much like the Facebook logo.
That's what my mom says. Every time we watch it, she's like, oh, look, they're opening up Facebook. And I'm just like, that's hilarious. And I'm trying to, like, I try to find the connection to, like, why that would be relevant. I don't see it.
No, it's just ahead of its time. It was predicting an era that was yet to come, you know?
Yeah. But also, like, there's even murder in Shrek. Like, can we talk about that? And it's also subtle. Like, all these things are so subtle. In the very beginning, when they're rounding up the fairy tale creatures and they show the three bears, you have the mom and the dad are in one cage, and then you have the son in the other cage, and he's like, this cage is too small. Then when they show Farquaad on the bed looking at the repeat of Fiona, there's the rug, and it's like a bear rug with the bow on it. It's the mom. And it's just like subtleties, but it's just so much thought went into this movie. It's insane. Like, they truly thought a lot about everything that went into this movie, right down to the soundtrack. Like, the soundtrack slaps. Like, yes, Smash Mouth, that very first song, so All Star, like, it's great, but the entire album slaps. Like, there are days where I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna listen to. You know what? I'm gonna listen to the Shrek soundtrack. And it stands true for the first one, the second one, it kind of, like, falters after that, but masterpiece.
Yeah, no, it's a great soundtrack. So yeah, the bear cage scene, not only could it, I'm looking at this like in a critical film theory situation, right? So you could say that could be an example of deportation, because there are so many instances in which parents are separated from their children, vice versa, whatnot. And it's a very clear example of animal cruelty, you know? He was skinned and turned into a rug. Like, it's very small details that if you don't watch it, like, a couple times, these are things you're just gonna miss.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing was just the pure friendship and the morale that you'd learn between Shrek and Donkey's relationship. It's probably one of the most heartwarming parts of the film, because it literally starts off with Donkey being like, you know, I don't belong there. Can I follow you around? Like, you seem nice. And that's just it. It's like, hey, I vibed really well with this person. I want to be their friend.
And there's fan theory around that very first scene where they meet. Also, not me looking into Shrek fan theory, whatever. Judge as you may. I have no regrets. But there's fan theory on Shrek that their very first encounter, when Donkey's like, I really like you, like, what's your name? And Shrek kind of pauses and has to think, and he's like, Shrek. Like, he just came up with that name on the spot. Like, that's the theory, that nobody has ever spoken to him long enough. Like, we know he has no parents, no anything. He's by himself. He's lived alone his whole life. And in the second movie, there's a scene where the king goes, don't ogres eat their own kids, or something like that. And so, obviously, that commentary wouldn't have been a thing if there wasn't some kind of relevance to what goes on in, like, the ogre world, right? Like, everyone knows ogres exist. So, for all we know, he ran away or was pushed away from home, or his parents were killed, or whatever the case may be. And he's been by himself his whole life. Everyone runs away from him. Everyone is scared. He is the ultimate outsider. So for all we know, this dude really had no name. Nobody's ever called him anything. Nobody's ever bothered to know. And then here comes along this annoying little donkey, and he's like, what's your name? And he thinks of it on the spot. Like, yeah, this sounds cool, so I guess it's Shrek. And then he just kind of rolls with it.
That's really wholesome. That's a very nice example of, I guess, finding self-identity. Like, if you really want to look at it through a critical lens, that could be a good example of that. But another, like, tidbit from Donkey is when, I think it was in that same scene right after Shrek was like, you in what army? Because the rest of them ran away. Donkey was like, you have that I don't care what anyone else thinks attitude, and I respect that. And such open, clear communication of, like, hey, this is a very positive attribute that I think I see in you. And, you know, I think it deserves to be noticed and said. Stories like that, when you're so young and hearing and seeing something portrayed like that, it's just important. I don't know what else to say, but we're only like, 15, 20 minutes into the film at this point.
They're so wholesome in their own right, and they're polar opposite, like, characters. Like, Donkey represents, like, innocence, and he really knows nothing. Like, things go over his head. Like, Shrek is very adamant about, like, get away from me, you can't live here. And he's just like, okay, so can I stay with you? Oh, I'll stay outside? Okay, great, I'll make waffles in the morning. Like, things don't deter him because it just goes right over his head. Like, he is the portrayal of innocence and kindness and, like, just overall, like, genuineness. And then on the polar opposite scale, you have Shrek. who is a pessimist at best, who only sees the bad in people because of course he gets bullied, essentially. Like, that's what he is. He gets bullied, he gets tortured. People are scared of him, and so he revels in this character that people have created for him. Like, ogres are scary. So he, as an ogre, is like, well, now I have to be scary. I have to live up to this, whatever people think of me, because that is the identity they have given him. So that's the identity he has adopted. But then later on in the movie, you see he's actually full of insecurities. Like, yes, he acts like this I don't care about anything person. Like, oh, you think I'm scary, so I'm gonna act scary. But then as he gets deeper and deeper into this friendship with Shrek, you see he's the most vulnerable person ever. Like, everyone is scared of me. You don't know what it's like. Like, he is an outsider. He knows he's an outsider. He feels like an outsider. And then when he starts talking about, like, well, nobody likes ogres, you know, how could anyone like... And then when Fiona comes along and they're getting along, he still can't believe it. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people relate to when they felt like outsiders their whole lives, or they've been bullied or pushed aside. Suddenly someone comes and shows genuine interest and you're like, whoa, halt, reverse, back away. That's not real. It's a prank. It's a prank. It's a joke. That it can't be me that you're interested in. And like, we see that full front here.
An amazing example of that also ties into when Shrek was out there trying to pick that little sunflower and was like trying to hype himself up to like go talk to Fiona. And then it was a very good example of bad place at the wrong time, because all he heard from Donkey and Fiona's conversation was like, oh, you know, ogres are so ugly, and you know, what am I gonna do here if I stay with Shrek? And that's not what the conversation was about at all. So it ties into like not being able to communicate 100%. Being there and selectively hearing only certain things, and then, you know, coming out with the wrong example, the wrong takeaway from a whole situation, you know. Oh, but two other things, right? One, talking about the juxtaposition of political leadership. You got Farquaad, who doesn't want things for the right reasons at all. He's just very selfish. And you have Shrek accidentally becoming the savior that everyone actually needed. Because all of these fairy tale creatures, characters got banished into his swamp, and then he was like, no, we have to fix this. And then accidentally become someone with principle, morale, and the core values that they need in a leader, you know?
Propaganda. Lord Farquaad was a dictator. At best, that's what he was. And he fed his people all this ogres are bad, fairy tale creatures are bad, because they posed a threat. And the people believed him. So he pushed them aside and got them cast out. People believe they're bad because they're not like, that's why it's so important to get them out of Duloc. Because if people can't mingle with them, they won't know that what he's saying is actually a false narrative. Like, if I get rid of all the magical creatures, then you won't know that they're actually good people. They just happen to be magical creatures. And I can feed you this propaganda that they're bad, that they're evil, that we have to be scared of them, that they're after us kind of thing. And so here comes along Shrek, accidentally becoming the leader of the very people that were cast aside. And even we see, honestly, I feel like we see how much Farquaad is hated, even in that beginning scene when he goes and he's fighting the knight. Because he's so charismatic that he manages to even get the people who came to watch the knights fight for the honor to go save Fiona to be on his side. Like, suddenly they're all cheering him on, like, yeah, like, give him the chair, or like, yeah, like, blah, 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 blah. And they start cheering him on. And Farquaad sees that, which is why he sees Shrek as a threat. But the thing is, the more Shrek fight for his land and for his right to whatever it is that is his, the more people will follow him. So he knows that he cannot win by fighting Shrek. So instead, he appeases to him. Like, well, if I give him what he wants, he will just leave and people will stop following him. But you know, in the end, Farquaad is a selfish jerk. So he's his own downfall, as it is with many dictators.
I just think it's also funny, like, the people that Farquaad surrounded him. We both know this is a film for children, but, you know, just trying to point out just how intricate it is. When he was looking through the magic mirror and was, like, seeing all the candidates for the princesses, and his henchmen were in the back being like, oh, pick whatever, and then the main henchman was like, pick number 3. If you're only listening, you know, the henchman was holding up 2 fingers and saying 3. So it's the people that are surrounding this so-called king, or who's supposed to be leading the land, not very intelligent. And I feel like that applies to a lot of countries' leaderships that we've seen. Here in America, here in, you know, other places in the world, it matters who's at the top. It really does.
Absolutely. Leaders often, especially when they are ones that kind of don't hold a lot of love from the people or don't have actual good things to do, will surround themselves with people who will support whatever they say. Because at the end of the day, they can be like, well, I have this council of people. It's not just me making decisions. And these council of people have agreed with me. Therefore, I'm making the right decision, which is why, I mean, it happens everywhere, even not in leaders. Like, you surround yourself with like-minded people, and we've seen, like, in every movie and show, even in real life, like, plenty of, like, real-life bullies surround themselves with people that are not that bright because there's no one to counter them. There's no one to fight them. There's no one to say no to whatever it is that they're doing or saying. And so, I mean, we see that everywhere, and then you even see that here. And honestly, that's something I never picked up on, like Thelonious pointing up 2 fingers but saying number 3. But also how manipulated Thelonious is. Because in the beginning, he's all for Lord Farquaad, because that's probably all he knows. Like, if this dude has been king his whole life, Thelonious has been by his side his whole life, most likely. So all he knows is, well, this is my king, this is my friend. So he is his henchman, he is his left hand, he is his right hand. He threatens the mirror when he punches the other mirror. Like, he's loyal to a fault. And then in the end, he sees how it is wrong to follow Lord Farquaad. Because in the end, not that he betrays him, but he tries to stop Farquaad, or doesn't stop the rebellion against him. Rather, like, you see, it's just like, he's such a minor character, but like, you see, I believe it's him who writes when Shrek and Fiona get married, and he like holds it up.
I thought that was an amazing nod to that era of television, because it's very like live audience, you have to cue them, applause, awe, etc., or like silence and stuff like that. I love that, because you won't really see something like that in modern cinema or television or whatever stream of content that you're watching. It's very to that time, you know. I'm just really amazed at how well this holds up as a movie, as an animation. Like, I genuinely think that there was a whole hate wagon for Shrek not being a good animation, but something coming out of DreamWorks like that in 2001, and you can watch it to this day, and it still have all the beats that you need for a good film, have all the beats that you need for a cinematic film. Like, and it's an animation. Like, do you know how much work went into that to make it look that good in 2001, with the technology that they had for animation back then to what they have now? And if you put it side by side, it's like, it will hold up. Like, it is comparable to quality animation these days. Like, maybe a few more pixels these days, but you know, what an amazing piece of work. Anyways, we've gone into nitty-gritty details. Let's talk a little bit about like our favorite scenes and the comedic relief that this movie has, and how it like ties that in throughout the entire thing. I gotta say, one of my favorite parts was when they were in the courtyard and they were talking to Farquaad, and he was like, that's so ugly or whatever, and Shrek goes, it's just a donkey.
The sheer confidence that Shrek has in himself, despite being so extremely insecure, is amazing. Which, like, is relatable, because on many occasions, we have both spoken, well, I speak for myself, but, like, on many occasions where I've been like, I am the most insecure person, and at the same time, I feel like I'm better than a lot of people. And it makes no sense, but that is exactly what Shrek is as well. And I don't know if that's maybe he influenced my personality a lot more than I thought, or maybe I like the movie so much because it reminds me of how I feel so much, but it's just wonderful.
I'm 100% sure that this movie is the reason why I cling on to it's basically a character trait at this point of, I'm here for emotional support, or I'm here for moral support, because when they're crossing the bridge to the castle, like, that's what I think Donkey says to Shrek.
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, that's really been in my subconscious since 2001. I was a wee child.
But okay, so personally, I feel like while I do relate with a lot of Shrek's trait, if I was to pick a single character in the entire franchise that I feel like embodies me, I am Donkey. Like,
oh, 100%.
that is who I am to my very core, and I find that hilarious. Like, yes, I am insecure a lot of the times and I overthink my actions and what I do, but there are plenty of moments where I am not very good at reading cues on people, and I will just continue on until someone is like, and I'm like, what? Like, I don't. And it's what you see with Donkey and Shrek. Like, he just continues and continues and continues and refuses to allow Shrek to see himself in that negative way. When Shrek is trying to relate himself to, he's an onion, Donkey's like, all right, well, why do we have to be so negative? Like, what about a cake? What about a parfait? Have you ever met someone who said they didn't like a parfait? Like, and I'm just like, that is me with the people around me. I'm like, well, why are we focusing on this bad thing? Here's how it's good. Like, the epitome of annoying little talking donkey, like, is who I am.
Honestly, I think Donkey as a character is just so good. It's just, whoever had that idea was, the writers of this movie was just so well-versed, educated for their time, you know, very particular in the things that they wanted to talk about, the subjects that they wanted to touch upon, and the jokes. When Donkey talks to Dragon for the first time, he goes, I would love to stay, but I'm an asthmatic, and I don't know if it'll work out. I, like, Donkey completely forgot about that. And it just, I had to pause the movie, and I laughed for a good, 5 minutes straight. Like, it's just, someone on that team, on the writer's team, was an asthmatic, and was like, bro, we have to make the perfect joke.
But also, it's like, just that whole scene is hilarious, because he also is like, why are you doing that with your eyes? And he's like, wait, you're a girl dragon? Oh, of course you're a girl dragon. Like, what? Like, that whole scene is just a one big what?
And let's talk about the conversation around consent, because there is a moment where he's curled up in Dragon's tail, and he goes, that is unwanted physical contact. And I was like, let's go. Let's go. For a 2001 movie? Oh, I love this movie so much.
It's honestly, it's such a genuinely good, wholesome movie. Like, even if you don't want to think about, any of the deeper meanings behind everything, it's a fun watch. Like, it's hilarious. And one of the things, I don't know if anybody who listens or watches us speaks Spanish, but if you've never seen Shrek in Spanish, you are missing out. While obviously there are direct translations because it's still the same concept, it's just in Spanish, some of the jokes just translate so much better in Spanish. And I can't think of any particular thing to come to mind right now, but the person who voices Donkey is this famous Mexican comedian actor named Eugenio Derbez, and he is honestly freaking hilarious. I'm sure you've seen him in movies and small scenes here and there. I don't know if you ever saw the movie, I think it's Overboard or something like that, where he's this super rich man and he falls overboard on a boat, loses his memory, and falls in love with this nobody girl. And she convinces him that they're married actually, and kind of to torture him, and they fall in love. It's a hilarious movie. 10 out of 10 would recommend. But he's been acting in English movies recently. But he's originally he's a Mexican actor and comedian. So he voices Donkey. So that in itself is his voice is so distinguishable. The second I heard Donkey, I was like, I know exactly who that is. Which one made me super excited. And then the jokes just translate so much differently. Because, there's certain things that you can't translate directly and it'll be funny. So the replacement jokes are just hilarious. And I know that he wrote a bunch of the jokes. When they didn't translate, he helped write those jokes. And it's so good. And I don't often like watching movies in Spanish if they're originally in English. Because I'm while Spanish is my first language, English is my main language. So that's what I watch everything in. But this movie, I would take the Spanish version over the English version any day of the week.
I have not watched the Spanish version, but I think that's what I'm going to do this weekend. Just to experience that. We've been rambling for quite some time now, so one of my last favorite parts of Shrek 1 is when Shrek gets the arrow in the butt and Fiona tells Donkey to go look for a blue flower with red thorns. And Donkey goes off, and he's repeating to himself, blue flower, red thorns. This would be so much easier if I wasn't colorblind. And he's walking through an entire patch of blue flowers with red thorns. It was just
wholesome.
The pureness of jokes like that is, I love them. Everyone knows I'm a sucker for bad puns. I love bad jokes. This is just completely up my alley, and it's perfect. other than the jokes, the writing itself, I do think that the cinematics of this film is incredible. Like, there's the whole sequence where the gingerbread man was being interrogated. I forgot that happened. The slow pouring of the milk, the dramatic build-up, him getting dunked in and then slapped onto the metal tray, and, Farquaad even pulling at the buttons. Like, it's just the attention to detail and texture. Like, there's so much texture in this movie. It blows my mind.
But also, like, one of the things, like, I know we've been rambling for a while, but who is he looking for? Like, that is the big question that never really gets answered. And, I mean, we know he's looking for a woman, right? So the theory is that he's looking for the narrator who is creating the fairy tale creatures. Like, that is the theory, and that's why he is torturing the fairy tale creatures. Like, he's torturing the gingerbread man. And the gingerbread man says, like, oh, she lives on Drury Lane. Like, do you know the gingerbread man? Like, yeah, she's married to him. So we're looking for a woman. That's who he is trying to find. And when they find the magic mirror, which, tells all, knows all, the first thing that the gingerbread man says is, don't tell him anything. But we see how dumb and selfish Farquaad is in that scene, because he has this mirror that holds all the power. He's been torturing these creatures, trying to find the answers, and now he has the ability to ask the one person who actually knows where this person that he's looking for is, and the first thing he concentrates on is finding a wife to solidify his kingdom. And he still has this mirror at his disposal, because we see him watching it over and over in his bedroom, which is another, like, inappropriate scene. I don't know if you noticed, but the tent does rise when he is looking at Fiona, and still does not ask, where is the person that I'm looking for? Instead is solely focused on a woman to solidify his, like, kingship.
Okay, listen, we've been going on for a while, but just two more things, alright? I was reminded of the Robin Hood scene where Fiona absolutely just kicks butt. And it's, like, again, for a 2001 film, like, I know that this was only 20 years ago, but we're only 20-something, right? This was an integral part of our childhood. And for that to be as powerful as it is, and just so unapologetic, like, she's like, yeah, I just kicked all their butts. Also, it's a semi-musical, but we can get into that at another time because, it's a different conversation. But her being like, yeah, I lived in a castle by myself for so many years. I had to learn how to, like, ward off people and whatever. And
We're
it's just, that's just it.
And he even said, and the fact that, like, the toxic masculinity that you see in that one scene where she's like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm here to rescue you. Clearly you need me to rescue you. And, like, then when she kicks all their asses, she doesn't need anyone to rescue her. She can rescue herself. She is willingly going with Shrek. She is willingly doing what she wants. Like, she has her own autonomy. She doesn't need anyone to save her. And she proves that to him. And it's just, like, it's wild because we also see he's not actually trying to save her. He's just trying to bed her, because they say it in the song, like, oh yeah, like, all the girls love him. And he's like, whoa, like, it's just this wonderful movie.
Yeah, what a film, man. What a film. Let us know if you want us to talk about, like, each movie individually, because we can then go on to specifically talk about Shrek 2, Shrek 3, and Shrek 4. There is an upcoming 2022 Puss in Boots movie. So, do you want us to also have a whole side podcast just talking about movies? Because
just about the Shrek franchise.
I could do that. We could branch out. Vaguely adult films. Hold on, that has a... We'll workshop. But anyways, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna ask if you saw the Puss in Boots also has a show, but did you see the first movie that came out?
No, I don't remember if I have. Like, I was looking at the Wikipedia page and I was like, this rings a bell. But again, when I watched Shrek yesterday, it was like I watched it for the first time. It was just part of the repressed section of life.
But yeah, so, to end this wonderful episode, Puss in Boots was also, that movie also rang very deep. Like, a lot of the details, it's about envy, like, growing up and how it eats away at you even though it doesn't need to. Kind of similar to, you've seen Meet the Robinsons, how Goob is, like, jealous of his friend, but his friend is never competing with him. It's the same thing in Puss in Boots. And it's, we have orphanages and nuns and growing up on the streets, and it's a deep movie altogether. Doesn't compare to Shrek, but it's good.
We're gonna review that movie in a couple of weeks. We'll get back to you on that. But as always, hope you've enjoyed this. Let us know if you want more of this, because I would definitely do more of this. Stay hydrated, get vaccinated if you can. Stay safe out there. Still wear your mask. And we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening.
Vaguely adult. Things are just vaguely adult.